Hello, everyone, and welcome to Deborah Hanson Read With Me. I'm Deborah Hanson. So today we're going to do a quick chapter 20 and 21 summary review of Chains by Laurie Halse Anderson. So of course, this doesn't replace reading the book. Of course, you need to be reading the book as you're going along, but you know what? Maybe you have a quiz, maybe you have a book talk, maybe you have something coming up, and you just want to kind of look over chapter 20, 21 today really quickly. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to do a little summary, and I'm going to give you some good quotes that you can use in case you need to do that for some homework that you have coming. And if you want to hear the whole chapter, just check out my channel and you'll see that I read all the chapters and I do little commentaries. I kind of read them as if I would be reading them in class. So, that's kind of the idea of just sort of that you understand it as you're listening to the story, and it's not a robot voice. I hope I don't sound like a robot anyway. Okay, so we're going to start off here with chapter 20. And so here we go. So in a nutshell, now that the British have invaded the city, it's kind of all chaotic, right? But of course, Madam's being her old grumpy, moody self, and Isabel's kind of getting worried because she hasn't heard from the Patriots. She hasn't heard from Colonel Reagan, and she knows that they're going to maybe help her with her freedom. So it's kind of a little bit like, she's a little bit on pins and needles at this point. 10 days later, the Continental Congress has declared independence, and cue the party and celebrating by the Patriots, because this is time to celebrate. And if you're doing this for history class, you probably are learning about the Continental Congress, the American Revolution, the Declaration of Independence, all of that. And this book has really great sort of tie-ins for history as well as English language arts. So whatever you're doing it for, this is a super book. As the celebrations escalate, the Patriots tear down the statue of King George. They chop it up with an axe, and there is excitement in the air. They decided to melt down the statue and make bullets for the army to fight against the British. Cue irony there. Okay. Isabel's quite busy with everything that's going on, and she's really surprised when Becky tells her that Madame has left sweet milk and gingerbread for the girls before they go to bed. This leaves Isabel kind of wondering if Madame's completely lost her mind, or maybe she's suffering from a head injury. We don't really know, right? Anyway, it's all a little suspicious, but hey, Isabel's not one to pass up milk and cookies, so she goes, hey, I'm going to do this. We're going to have our milk and cookies. Isabel's wanting to read her book before she falls asleep, but she's having a really hard time staying awake. So at this point, we can kind of infer that there was something suspicious, all right, with those milk and cookies. And so we know that in the next chapter, she is going to be a little bit upset about that. Anyway, here's some quotes that you can use if you need to, like I said, at a book talk, or maybe you're quoting for an essay. I watched for Curzon every day, but Bellingham's affairs kept him out of sight. I was afraid to seek out Colonel Reagan, afraid that word would get back to Madame and put our lives in jeopardy. So that's from page 124 in my book. It's the hardcover Chains book. So if you have a different book, it may not be exactly on page 124, but it will be around about there. So you can have a look in your book. The plan was to melt down all lead into bullets. We'll fire majesty at the redcoats, joked a man with a booming voice, of course, because they were melting down the statue of King George. So that was kind of funny. Make sure both of the girls eat something nourishing and sweet. That's on page 126. I was befuddled, which kind of just means I was confused, right? She's being kind to Ruth again. What's going on? This woman's lost her mind again. We kind of know she's a bit crazy, but anyway. Page 127. Tell Sal to enjoy her cake and night off. She's worked hard these weeks, and she could do with a good night's sleep, on page 28. So again, a little inference there. We know Madame is not a nice person. We know that she's not doing anything nice. So we have a lot of predictions going on at this point of the story saying, what is she up to? She called me Sal instead of girl, I asked, and you're full certain she didn't hit her head today? This is, of course, Isabella asking Becky, what's going on here? Something's not quite right. And that's on page 128. So the last one is, in betwixt one thought and the next, I fell asleep. For that, I shall never forgive myself. This is the end of the chapter. So really a little dramatic there at the end, because you know that probably our suspicions, our predictions are correct at this point. In betwixt just is another fancy word of saying in between one thought and the next. So we're going to wait to see in chapter 21, what happened and what does she not forgiving herself about. Okay. Just a quick little side note here, and I'm just going to leave the slide here just in case you are doing this for history class, the Continental Congress declaring independence. And there's just a little bit about that. Like I said, I mean, you're probably doing that in class anyway, but it really is just the fact that they were declaring themselves independent from the British, because we know that they just didn't want to be under that control anymore. And they had confirmed an alliance with the government of France. France and Britain never liked each other very much in history. And, you know, you can see that in many, many different points throughout history, but especially during this time. So if you need any information on that, of course, you know, you can find that on the internet. So here we go with chapter 21. This is the summary of 21. So we know we finished on a really dramatic note in chapter 20, where she said, I'm never going to forgive myself. Let's find out why. When Isabel finally wakes up from her bad dream, she realizes that she's overslept and notices that Ruth is nowhere to be found. She asks Becky if she's seen Ruth, and Becky avoids the answer. And then it hits Isabel, and her biggest nightmare has finally come true. Madame sold Ruth. So things get a little crazy from this point, okay? Because we know that Isabel, I mean, that was her biggest fear. So Isabel confronts Madame Lockton. Sorry, another typo there. Madame is not impressed at how Isabel is behaving, and hits her over the head with the picture frame. So, okay, this is not going to go well. We know this right now. Isabel is completely lost her mind, okay? And so Madame, of course, knows that Isabel is really angry, and so she hits her with this picture frame. So Isabel's kind of like, you know, shaken, and she's not sure what's going on. And Becky basically tells her at this point to run, because you are in big trouble, girl. Like, you are calling, you know, Miss Lockton names, and you're fighting and you're arguing, and this is not a good thing. And so she runs out the front door and runs down the street, and Madame Lockton chases her. So that could be a scene, like, even if this was a movie, this would be like a really funny scene, I guess, but it's not so funny for Isabel, but it would be kind of a humorous scene. As Isabel's running down the street, she realizes she has only one choice, and that's she's got to go to Colonel Reagan. She's got to go, and she's got to, like, use her, like, you know, get out of jail free card, because he's her only hope here, because Madame Lockton is good and mad, okay? So she's hoping he's going to save her. As she runs into the camp, she's shouting, Ad Astra, like a crazy woman, a crazy girl, I guess, until someone finally leads her to the colonel. Just as she's about to spill the whole story, in comes an amazingly angry Madame Lockton, and she storms into the room, and you could just imagine the smoke coming out of her ears at this point. Madame demands to know what's going on, and she tells him that this girl is just basically very disobedient. She's a troublemaker. Isabel begs him to help her, but he tells her that his hands are tied and he can't go against her master. And this is kind of the rules, basically, that he can't really do anything at this point, because she's owned by Madame Lockton, so he can't help her. Isabel realizes that he's not going to help her, and she is really, like, in trouble now. So as a last-ditch effort, she basically tries to escape out the window, but that doesn't quite go as planned, and she's pulled back into the room. And well, we have to wait to chapter 23 to see what happens there. But again, not going so well for Isabel. Let's have a look at some good quotes that you could use if you were talking about this chapter. So here's basically when she wakes up and she realizes that she's overslept and something's not quite right. Where's Ruth? Oh, Becky looked down at the worn tips of her shoes, then turned away from me. Her eyes were puddled up and red-rimmed, on page 131. A little bit later, no. I backed away, shaking my head. She didn't. She wouldn't. No. Page 132. She's gone, Becky said. Gone, I repeated. Gone where? Becky studied her shoes again. Sold. Again, this was, you know, Isabel's worst nightmare, that Ruth was going to be sold, and she wasn't, and she had promised her mom that she was going to protect her, and obviously this had gone very wrong. I walked up 2 steps. Did you sell Ruth? You will not address me in that insolent manner. Now, there's a little bit of foreshadowing too in that word insolent, okay? Just telling you now. Her voice shook a little. I took another step up. Answer me, you miserable cow. Did you sell my sister? Okay. That line, this is my students' favorite line, I think, in the whole book. We always talk about this line because, I mean, can you just imagine this little Isabel, who is just angry as you can't even believe it, shouting at Madame Lockton, who's also crazy, and calling her a miserable cow. So things are not going to go well. Madam grabbed a painting from the wall and threw it down on my head. I raised my head too late and the frame crashed into me. Becky dragged me down the steps and shoved me toward the open door. Run, she screamed. Page 135. So again, those are from my book. So if you're looking in your book, if it's a different version than mine, it'll be close. It'll be around those pages. This is the hardcover one. Thomas, we cannot interfere. He said, this girl is no concern and you are late. We dare not keep him waiting. This is where he's in the room. She's in the room with Colonel Reagan, and Madame Lockton is saying how, she's basically disobedient. She's terrible. She's all these bad things. And Colonel Reagan just said, yeah, I can't really do anything. Thomas is his aide, I guess. And he's saying, listen, you know the rules. We can't do this. Colonel Reagan fastened his collar without looking at me. The law binds my hands and my actions. You must return with your mistress, he said, concentrating on his task. Even during time of war, we must follow the rules of propriety and civilization. Again, we are... there's still a lot of rules associated with the slaves and ownership and things like that, and things haven't changed quite yet. So he really is tied by the laws right now. I bolted for the open window. I almost made it, but we know that almost is only good in horseshoes, right? Okay, page 140. So that's basically the end of chapter 21. So thank you for listening. If you like the video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you can subscribe, that's great. We love seeing the numbers go up. My students are always watching to see how my numbers go up. So again, if you have any questions, put them in the comments. I answer everyone. So even if it's a question about the book, I'm happy to answer that. If you're confused about a part or section, or if you want me to read some other books, let me know what other books you'd like to read. Right now, I've primarily focused on Chains and The Giver, but I am going to add some to the list soon. So have a great day or evening or wherever you are in the world, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.